it's been an interesting thing.
September 11th, 1998, 184 years after the Battle of Plattsburgh, on a crisp 48-degree day. Shirley Kester, how are you doing?
Great. I'm just relieved that it's here. The day is here, and we're going to do it.
Shirley of the Clinton County Historical Association says, I'm a little punchy because there's been a lot going on leading up till today, and it wasn't until, yesterday morning that we've got the final permission to raise this anchor today of the Confiance.
That's absolutely right. The events took a little strange turn a little over a week ago. It appeared that the British did own the anchor, after all, still. So yesterday morning I was driving into the museum and deciding that I would have to call everybody and say, sorry folks, we're not going to do that this week. Get to work, and I got a communication from Art Cohn from the Maritime Museum, who told me that the word had come from the British government that we were indeed going to be able to do it. They were going to give it to us, and actually the wording is that they are going to give it to the town. So they're not giving it to the nation, or maybe not to the state, although the state does have jurisdiction over this sort of thing, but give it so that the people can see it locally. With the proviso is that it be displayed for local viewing. Not sold, not given away, but installed locally.
Well, I think we ought to explain the process to people now that we're standing here. First of all, I want you to introduce me to this gentleman standing next to you.
Standing next to me is Gary Chartrand. Gary appeared at the museum, I think, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
About 3 weeks
Three
ago.
weeks ago, or more, maybe.
3 or 4 weeks ago.
And I'll let Gary tell his story, because he came up with a very interesting collection of newspapers.
Gary's the oldest paper boy here today.
The oldest paper boy. I've been collecting historical newspapers for about 30 years, and I wanted to find something on the Battle of Lake Champlain and the Battle of Plattsburgh, and I ran across a collector in Paxton, Maryland, so I bought them from him, and then I put them in frames, and they're in the Historical Museum here in Plattsburgh right now alone.
Isn't that terrific? And we made some copies of this very special newspaper today that I want to show our viewers. This is the Charleston Courier.
Right.
From October 4th, 1814. It took a while for the news to get out, didn't it, Gary?
It took about 3 or 4 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, for the news to travel from Plattsburgh to Charleston.
Okay. I want to open this paper in the back end, and so perhaps we can get a sight. What are we looking at here? What is it? What's it all about?
Well, right there you're looking at another part of the paper, but if you turn it around, you'll see I think it's the Battle of Lake Champlain on there.
Yes, it is.
The Battle of Lake Champlain, if you turn it around on the other side.
All right, let me flip it around.
Yeah.
Right on the front side.
They didn't have no pictures in them days. They had fine print.
Yeah, there weren't the photography hadn't been really perfected.
And the paper will last 1,000 years if you take care of it, because it's made out of a rag content. Not like the papers they make today where they're so thin, but them papers they made way back will last a long time.
Now, what are we planning to do, Shirley, with these papers today?
Well, I have about 45 Brownie Scouts coming to the museum tomorrow, and on Sunday, Cadet Scouts. There will be some Boy Scouts also, and little brothers of the Girl Scouts. And they're going to be selling these newspapers as souvenirs of the weekend, courtesy of Gary. He's allowed me to copy this and have it reproduced at the Penny Saver here in Plattsburgh. It has 8 pages, and it's going to be sold for $2.
What a neat keepsake. What a wonderful idea, because this brings the past right to the present, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it's our only real tangible evidence. We can talk all we want to, and we can read everything we want, but you can't really get your hands on the original documents very easily, so we're indebted to Gary.
This program is called Our Little Corner, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Shirley is a little from way back when. From where?
Geneseo. It's Livingston County down near Rochester.
Oh, see?
And it appears we may have a common ancestor.
I'm almost positive. Have you ever been back to Ireland and
No, I
Scotland?
haven't. No, I haven't.
Neither have I.
Well, I think we should go.
I think we should do our thing to go and trace those roots and find out that they might actually come together.
Wouldn't that be great fun?
That would be wonderful. Where were you 2 years ago when this anchor was first raised?
At that point in time, I was serving on the board of directors of the Clinton County Historical Association. I regret to say I didn't see the anchor, so I'm looking forward to today.
Oh, I really should have brought the photographs. My wife and I, of course, when Frank called us and told us it was up, we came flying down here, almost doing the same thing you did this morning on the way.
Ooh, dear, let's not talk about that.
But we got down here and we got some of the very first photographs of it, and we were proud to do that. For the benefit of our viewers who may have been living in a cocoon somewhere, this is the anchor from the British flagship Confiance, which was, played a major role in this battle.
It certainly did. The Confiance was a very large frigate, a British frigate. It sailed down from Ile-aux-Noix, 10 miles north of the border, into the lake. Captain McDonough, or Commodore McDonough's fleet was anchored just off the bay where we're standing, hidden behind Cumberland Head. When the British fleet came down and rounded the head, they met the well-anchored boats of McDonough. Well-anchored is important to know because you can't fire from a moving deck of a boat, so he definitely had the advantage. The British regular troops were on shore. McDonough was firing on shore, and many of the early houses in Plattsburgh were lost during that conflict because they fired hot shot into them and burned them. Curiously enough, when you read some of the actual reports of the time, the citizens weren't particularly bitter about that because they were so anxious to, beat the enemy and defend their soil that they were actually almost gracious about their house being burned, if you can believe it. It's very interesting to read the first-hand reports.
That's fascinating. And it happened right about this time. The reason we're here and the reason we arrived shortly after 7 in the morning, because this battle took place in the morning 184 years ago. And we want to time the raising of the anchor. And by the way, a couple of divers who raised the anchor in the first place are going down into those cool waters of Lake Champlain. We want to get it up about this time it was shot off, don't we?
Yes, we certainly do. The British fleet entered the lake at 5:40 in the morning, and it was reported that they had entered the lake. The Confiance was a very large ship. It was actually constructed in Ile-aux-Noix. And when it was sighted, the news came down here rather quickly. And the actual battle began at 8:40 in the morning, the exact time that we're scheduled the anchor is scheduled to break the surface of the water.
This is just such a neat experience for me because we've known about this Battle of Plattsburgh ever since we moved here. We have tried as individuals and as groups to get our local populace excited about the history of the Plattsburgh, and it hasn't always been an easy thing, Shirley, has it?
Well, let me tell you and I'm a newcomer to the area, as we've just discussed, but let me tell you what I wrote in my application, and the application came from the Clinton County Historical Association. I have the permit in my hand here, and that's why I had this little mishap this morning coming in. What occurs to me is that there are such treasures here. There's such a vast richness of history. There are many of the people who are actually descended from the people who were directly involved in this conflict. But yet there's an undercurrent of an appreciation, but not particularly people stepping up and saying and being proud of their history. So what I wrote in my application is that I project that this anchor will be a coalescing factor for that pride and that history.
That's terrific. Let's tell people what's going to happen to it. First of all, we're going to tow it in,
Exactly.
and it'll be on display for a few hours.
It's going to be on display here in the harbor, just in front of the Naked Turtle, actually, the restaurant. Frank Pabst is the fellow who's going to be, his barge is out there already in preparation for the raising. Ken and Bill Van Stockham are the divers who originally found the anchor. Two conservators from the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum are on hand to assure that proper care is given to the raising, because what we hope for is that we won't disturb the paint. The paint is intact.
Oh, yes.
And it has to be very carefully secured on the deck of the barge, and then at that point, which should be probably somewhere around 10 o'clock this morning, it will be towed into the harbor here for public viewing, and it'll be in the harbor for 3 hours.
ultimately it'll be back in town once it's preserved by the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum.
It goes from here today, at the end of today, down to the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum at Basin Harbor, Vermont. It will undergo approximately 2 years of conservation efforts. There are a lot of complicated things that have to be done to it because it's comprised of wood and iron. And after that period of time, when it's fully conserved and able to withstand the climate, it'll be brought back here. And the plan right now is that it will be installed in the antechamber of the rotunda at City Hall. Mayor Rabideau is very excited about that, as are we all, and we've all worked together for this process. There are many people involved. It's a complicated procedure to do this.
Well, you know, you're a newcomer, and I've been around here for a while, and this whole thing is reminiscent of some activity we had a few years ago when I was out with a tape recorder broadcasting on the radio, the raising of some cannon off the bottom of Lake Champlain, off Cliff Haven, and there raged a controversy that went on for decades. Ultimately, one of those cannon was displayed up there in the rotunda of City Hall. I hope the conditions will be much more favorable this time around because I think you've done your homework.
I certainly have. I have to say, I've done everything I can. There are others involved. A representative of New York State will also be on hand today on the barge. His name is Phil Lord Jr. He's from the New York State Museum, from the Historic Survey Department. And in fact, the permit that I have in my folder that I'm holding right now is from that office, giving us permission to raise this, provided we follow those procedures, and to actually, we needed that. We couldn't have touched this anchor, as I've said before, without this permit. If we did, we were subject to really arrests and charges. They want us to assure everyone that the value of an archaeological find is the story of history. So we're not just raising an artifact, we're raising history. If people raise artifacts willy-nilly, they risk destroying the evidence of the past.
Oh, isn't she? She's downright eloquent. I want to see that permit before we get on the boat.
If you
I'll hold the coffee. You get the permit.